Today felt like an ordinary day. When it started, the kind of day where nothing looks special and you think you already know how it will end. I woke up, did the same small things, and carried the same quiet thoughts with me. I went out without expecting anything new. My mind was busy with unfinished feelings, with questions I never asked out loud, and with memories I thought I already understood. I believed I had a clear picture of you, of your choices, of your silence, and of the distance that slowly grew between us. I thought I had accepted it. I thought I had made peace with my own version of the truth. But life has a strange way of interrupting us when we are too confident in our conclusions. I was standing in a place I visit often, not thinking deeply, just waiting. The air felt normal, the noise around me familiar. Then I saw someone I did not expect to see today. At first, I almost ignored them. It took a second for recognition to settle in. This was someone connected to your past. Someone who knew parts of your life that I only guessed at. We had never been close, just aware of each other. Still, when our eyes met, there was no awkwardness, only a quiet surprise. We exchanged simple words, nothing heavy at first, the kind of talk people use to fill space. Yet something about their tone felt different, like they were carrying more than they planned to share. As we talked, your name came up naturally, without effort, without drama. I did not ask questions at first. I just listened. They spoke slowly, choosing simple words, as if they were careful not to hurt anyone. What they shared were not secrets in the way people usually think. There were no shocking facts, no hidden actions. Instead, there were emotions, moments, and misunderstandings that lived quietly between lines. They spoke about times when you felt unseen, about moments when you stayed silent, not because you did not care, but because you did not know how to explain yourself. Hearing this felt strange. It was not an attack on my beliefs, but it gently shook them. While they spoke, my mind moved back and forth between now and then. I remembered moments we shared, moments that once felt confusing or distant. I remembered times when your words were few, when your eyes looked tired, when you changed the subject too quickly. Back then, I thought those moments meant you were pulling away. I thought they were signs of disinterest or avoidance. I built stories around them, quiet stories that slowly hardened into beliefs. Listening to this new voice today, I realized how easily we fill silence with our own fears. They told me about a time in your past, when speaking honestly had cost you something important. They did not describe it with detail, only with feeling. They said you learned early that opening up could lead to loss, not comfort. That sentence stayed with me. It explained so much without accusing anyone. It did not excuse everything, but it added weight to your quietness. Suddenly your silence did not feel empty anymore. It felt heavy, full of things left unsaid, not out of choice, but out of habit, formed by experience. I noticed how calm the conversation felt. There was no pressure to agree, no attempt to change my mind forcefully. It felt like someone opening a window and letting fresh air in. Then stepping back, I asked a few gentle questions, not to confirm anything, but to understand. Each answer was simple, honest, and careful. They spoke about misunderstandings that grew because nobody stopped to clarify them, about how people often assume the worst when explanations come too late. As they spoke, I felt a quiet discomfort, not because they were wrong, but because parts of what they said fit too well. Memories started lining up differently in my mind. I remembered a conversation where I expected reassurance, but received quiet instead. I remembered how I walked away feeling ignored. Now I wondered if you were standing there, wanting to say something but not knowing where to begin. I remembered moments when I interpreted distance as lack of care, without considering that distance can sometimes be a form of protection. These thoughts did not erase my feelings, but they softened their sharp edges. The conversation ended naturally, without a dramatic close. We said goodbye, and they left. I stayed where I was for a while, not moving, just breathing. The place felt the same, but I did not. It felt like someone had gently rearranged the furniture in my mind. Nothing was removed, nothing was added, but the space felt different. I was not suddenly certain about everything. I did not feel clear or resolved. I felt thoughtful, quiet, and a little unsettled in a calm way. As I walked away, I replayed the words I heard, not obsessively, but slowly. I thought about how often we think we know someone completely, based on fragments and reactions. How rarely we stop to imagine the unseen parts of their story. I realized that understanding does not always come from direct conversations. Sometimes it arrives sideways, through unexpected voices, on days that start like any other. I am not sure what this new understanding will change. I am not sure if it will lead to a conversation, or simply to more patience in my heart. I do know that today reminded me of something simple but important. People are more than the roles we assign them, more than the moments we freeze in our memory, more than the conclusions we draw when explanations are missing. Everyone carries a private weight that shapes how they move through the world. Tonight, as I sit with these thoughts, I do not feel the need to decide anything. I do not feel the urge to rewrite the past or predict the future. I just feel aware that truth is often layered, and that listening, even when it comes unexpectedly, can open doors we did not know were closed. I will carry this awareness with me, quietly, and see where it leads. After coming home, I did not turn on the lights right away. I sat there in the half-dark, letting the quiet stay with me. The conversation from today kept returning, not loudly, but gently, like a slow knock on the mind. I thought about how unexpected moments often carry the deepest lessons. I did not plan to think about you tonight. I did not plan to question my old thoughts again. But now they were awake, asking for space, asking to be felt instead of pushed away. I made tea and watched the steam rise. Even that simple movement reminded me of how feelings appear, rise, and disappear if we let them. I remembered how often I rushed to judge situations before letting them breathe. With you, I did the same. I filled empty spaces with my own fears and expectations. I told myself stories that felt safe because they gave me control. Control over pain, control over disappointment. But control does not always mean truth. As I sat there, memories came back one by one, not in order, not clearly. But honestly, I remember the day when you looked at me like you wanted to say something important. I remember asking, "Are you okay?" and you smiling and saying yes. Back then, I accepted that answer without looking deeper. Later, I used that moment as proof that you did not trust me enough. Now, today's words changed the shape of that memory. What if that smile was not distance, but fear? Fear of opening something that once hurt you deeply. I thought about how we expect people to heal at our pace, how we believe love should automatically erase fear. But fear does not leave that easily. It stays, even in safe places, even with kind people. Hearing this today made me softer toward you, but also toward myself. I realized I never asked the right questions. I only asked the easy ones, the ones that keep the surface smooth. The room felt still, but my mind was moving slowly, carefully. I was not angry. I was not sad in the way that hurts. I felt reflective. like standing near a quiet river and watching thoughts flow past. I wondered how many times in life we walk away thinking we were wronged, when really we were just unaware. Not innocent, not guilty, just unaware. I remembered moments when I spoke and expected understanding, but did not offer the same patience in return. I remembered how I wanted clarity from you while carrying my own unspoken emotions. I realize understanding is not a one-sided effort. It needs time, space, and sometimes help from unexpected voices. Today's meeting did not give me answers. It gave me context, and context changes everything. It does not rewrite history, but it explains the pauses, the silences, the gaps between words. It turns sharp memories into softer ones, still present, but easier to hold. As the night grew quieter, I thought about how easily people become characters in our personal stories instead of full human beings. We give them roles: the one who left, the one who hurt us, the one who did not care enough. These roles simplify pain, but they also limit truth. Today reminded me that people are always more complex than the roles we give them. I wondered if you know how you are seen, if you know how your quiet moments were understood, if you ever felt misunderstood in return. The thought did not bring regret. It brought curiosity, a calm, patient curiosity that does not demand answers right away. I thought about the future, but gently, not with plans or expectations, just with openness. Maybe nothing will change. Maybe this understanding will live quietly inside me, shaping how I listen, how I pause before reacting, how I choose words. Maybe one day it will lead to a conversation that feels safer than the last. Or maybe it will simply teach me to leave space for uncertainty. Before sleeping, I realized something simple. We do not always need to resolve everything. Sometimes it is enough to see a situation from a wider angle, to accept that our view was incomplete, not wrong, just partial. That acceptance alone can bring peace. I went to bed without answers, but with awareness. And for now, that felt enough. I woke up the next morning with a strange calm in my chest. It was not happiness, and it was not sadness. It felt more like space. The kind of space you feel after a long conversation that did not end with solutions, but with understanding. The sunlight came in slowly through the window, and for the first time in many days, I did not rush to check my phone or distract myself. I stayed there listening to my own breathing, letting yesterday settle fully inside me. Your face came to my mind, not sharply, not emotionally heavy, but gently. I noticed that the image of you felt different now. It was not attached to accusation or disappointment. It felt human, real. I realized how often memory changes when perspective changes. The past itself does not move, but our position does. And when we stand somewhere new, the same events look different. As I moved through the morning, small things triggered quiet thoughts. While washing my hands, I remembered how you once said you liked routines because they made life feel predictable. At that time, I thought you were just being careful, maybe even boring. Now I wondered if routine was your way of feeling safe in a world that once surprised you with pain. That thought did not excuse anything, but it explained something important. Explanation is not forgiveness, but it is the beginning of empathy. I stepped outside later, walking without purpose. The world looked the same, but my attention felt sharper. I noticed people passing by, each carrying their own unseen stories. I wondered how many misunderstandings live quietly between people every day. How many friendships, relationships, and connections slowly weaken not because of lack of care, but because of lack of understanding. We expect clarity without offering patience. We want openness without building safety. I remembered a moment with you that always stayed heavy in my mind. A day when I spoke honestly about my feelings, and you responded with silence. That silence hurt me deeply. I carried it as proof that my feelings mattered less. Today, I looked at that memory again. I asked myself a question I never asked before. What if that silence was not rejection but overwhelm? What if you did not know how to respond without reopening old wounds? That question did not remove the pain, but it changed the meaning of the moment. As I walked, I realized how often we assume intention. We believe we know why someone acts a certain way, but intention is invisible. We see behavior, not the fear or memory behind it. Yesterday's conversation reminded me that fear shapes behavior more than we admit. People do not always choose silence or distance. Sometimes it chooses them. I sat on a bench for a while watching the world move. I felt no urgency to reach conclusions. That itself felt new. In the past, I wanted clarity quickly. I wanted answers to settle my mind. Now I understood that clarity forced too early often creates false certainty. Real understanding moves slowly. It takes time to grow. I thought about the person I spoke to yesterday. How they shared your emotional truths without drama. How they did not try to make you look good or bad. They simply shared what they saw and felt. That honesty mattered. It showed me that understanding does not need to be loud. It does not need to prove anything. It just needs to be sincere. Throughout the day, I noticed my inner voice had changed. It was less sharp, less demanding. When thoughts about you appeared, they did not carry blame. They carried curiosity. That felt like progress, even if small. Curiosity opens doors that judgment keeps closed. I thought about how I might have appeared in your story. How my expectations, my words, my reactions may have felt confusing or heavy to you. That thought was uncomfortable, but necessary. Understanding others also means allowing ourselves to be seen imperfectly. I realized I was not just learning about you. I was learning about myself. In the afternoon, I remembered a conversation we once had about trust. You said trust grows quietly, not through big promises, but through consistent safety. At the time I nodded, but I did not fully understand. Now those words returned with weight. Safety is not just about being kind. It is about being patient with someone's pace. It is about not forcing emotional speed where there is emotional fear. I asked myself a hard question. Did I create enough safety for you to speak freely? Or did I unknowingly pressure you to explain yourself before you were ready? I do not know the answer. But asking the question felt important. Growth often begins with uncomfortable questions. As evening approached, I felt tired, but not drained. Thoughtful tiredness. The kind that comes from reflection, not stress. I realized that yesterday's unexpected meeting did not give me closure. It gave me depth. And depth changes how we carry unfinished things. I sat again in silence later, letting thoughts come and go. I did not try to organize them. I did not try to reach conclusions. I simply allowed them to exist. That felt respectful, both to myself and to you. Sometimes respect means not forcing meaning too quickly. I noticed that my emotions toward you felt softer, not weaker, just gentler. There was still uncertainty, still unanswered questions. But there was also space for compassion. Compassion does not mean forgetting pain. It means holding pain without turning it into a weapon. I wondered if one day I would talk to you again with this new understanding. If that conversation would feel different, maybe calmer, maybe more honest, or maybe it will never happen. And that possibility did not feel as frightening as it once did. I realized I do not need resolution to move forward with grace. Night came quietly. I turned off the lights and sat with my thoughts once more. I felt gratitude for yesterday, even though it was unexpected and unsettling. It reminded me that life still has lessons to offer when we think we already know the story. Before sleeping, I accepted something important. People are not puzzles meant to be solved. They are stories meant to be understood slowly, imperfectly. And sometimes, understanding does not lead to reunion or answers. Sometimes it simply leads to peace. As I closed my eyes, I did not think about what I would do next. I did not plan words or actions. I allowed uncertainty to stay. For now, that uncertainty felt honest. And maybe honesty, even without answers, is enough to let the heart rest. The next days moved slowly, not because time itself slowed, but because I noticed it more. Every hour felt fuller, as if my mind had decided to stop rushing ahead and finally stay where my body already was. I did normal things, simple things, the kind of tasks that usually pass without thought. Yet now each moment carried a quiet awareness. Yesterday's conversation had not faded. It had settled. It became part of how I looked at people, how I listened to silence, how I understood pauses between words. One morning, while standing near a window, I watched the street below. People walked past each other without knowing what the other carried inside. Some looked confident, some tired, some distracted. I wondered how many of them were misunderstood by someone they cared about. How many were silently carrying emotional truths that never found the right place to land. That thought did not make me sad. It made me patient. I noticed that my thoughts about you no longer came with a tight feeling in my chest. Instead, they arrived calmly, like memories asking to be re-examined rather than defended against. I remembered how we once laughed over small things, moments that felt light and real. For a long time, I told myself those moments were meaningless because of how things ended. Now I realize that endings do not cancel beginnings. Both exist together. I remembered a specific afternoon with you, one I had almost forgotten. We were sitting quietly, not talking much. At the time, I thought the silence meant boredom. Now I wondered if it meant comfort. I wondered how many times I misread peace as distance. That realization stayed with me throughout the day. As hours passed, I noticed how often people expect others to explain themselves clearly and fully, without realizing how difficult that can be. Words are heavy. They carry history, fear, and memory. For someone who learned early that honesty could lead to loss, speaking openly can feel like stepping onto unstable ground. I understood that now, not just intellectually, but emotionally. I thought about how quickly I once wanted certainty. I wanted clear answers because uncertainty felt uncomfortable. But now I was learning that uncertainty can be a place of growth. It keeps us humble. It reminds us that our understanding is always incomplete. In the afternoon, I received a message from someone unrelated, something ordinary. Yet even in that small interaction, I noticed how carefully I responded. I chose words with more patience. I paused before assuming tone or intention. It felt like a small change but meaningful. Yesterday had not just changed how I saw you. It had changed how I moved through the world. I sat later with a notebook, not to write answers but to let thoughts flow. I wrote about misunderstanding, about how easy it is to build walls made of assumptions, about how those walls protect us from pain, but also block connection. I realized I built such walls with you, brick by brick without noticing. I did not blame myself harshly for that. I understood why I did it. Pain teaches us defense. Experience teaches caution. Just as your past shaped your silence, mine shaped my expectations. We were two people carrying different fears, meeting in the middle, both wanting understanding, both unsure how to ask for it. That thought felt important. It removed the idea of right and wrong. It replaced it with human limitation. And human limitation deserves kindness, not judgment. As evening came, I remembered how often I replayed certain conversations in my mind, wishing I had said something differently. For the first time, I did not feel the need to correct the past. I accepted that I spoke and acted with the awareness I had then. Growth does not mean shame. It means learning. I wondered if you ever replayed moments too. If you ever wished you had explained yourself better. That thought did not create guilt. It created connection. Even without speaking, I felt closer to understanding your inner world. The days continued like this, quietly teaching me patience. I stopped expecting emotional clarity to arrive suddenly. I allowed it to unfold slowly, naturally. Some mornings I felt light. Some evenings I felt thoughtful. None of it felt overwhelming. I noticed that my memories of you no longer felt fixed. They felt flexible, open to reinterpretation. That flexibility did not erase the pain, but it softened it. It allowed room for empathy alongside hurt. One night I dreamed of a conversation that never happened. In the dream, we spoke calmly, without blame. There were pauses, but they were comfortable. When I woke up, I did not feel sadness. I felt acceptance. Dreams often show us what we are ready to feel. I realized that understanding does not require agreement. I may still feel differently than you. I may still wish some things were handled differently. But now, I understood that difference does not mean disrespect. It simply means two stories intersected without fully aligning. As time passed, I noticed something else. I was less focused on being understood, and more focused on understanding. That shift felt freeing. It removed pressure. It allowed me to listen more deeply, not just to others, but to myself. I learned to sit with unanswered questions without anxiety. I learned that not every emotional truth needs immediate expression. Some truths need time to mature before they can be shared safely. I thought again about the person I met that day. How a simple, unplanned conversation had changed my perspective so deeply. It reminded me that growth often comes from places we do not expect, from people we do not plan to listen to, from moments that interrupt our certainty. As another evening settled in, I sat quietly again, not searching for meaning, but open to it. I felt grateful for the calm that had replaced urgency, for the softness that had replaced blame. I did not know if I would ever speak to you again. I did not know if this understanding would lead to anything visible, but I knew it had already changed something important inside me. I accepted that people can care deeply and still hurt each other. That silence can mean fear, not indifference. That misunderstanding does not always come from lack of love, but from lack of shared language. As I prepared to sleep, I felt no need to close this chapter neatly. Life rarely offers clean endings. Some stories remain open unfinished, quietly influencing how we become kinder, wiser, and more patient. I closed my eyes with a sense of quiet respect for what was, for what is, and for what may never be fully known. And in that not knowing, I found peace. Another week passed, and with it came a deeper stillness inside me. Not emptiness, but a steady calm that stayed even when thoughts moved. I noticed how my days were no longer shaped by the need to understand everything immediately. I woke up, lived the hours, and let thoughts arrive when they wanted to. The story of that unexpected meeting no longer felt like an event. It felt like a turning point quietly woven into daily life. One afternoon, while sitting alone, I realized something subtle but important. I was no longer replaying old moments with the goal of proving myself right. Earlier, my memories had always carried a silent argument inside them, a need to confirm that my feelings were justified, that my pain had a clear cause. Now, those same memories felt softer. They were no longer evidence. They were experiences. And experiences do not need to be defended. I thought again about how easily misunderstanding grows when people protect themselves in different ways. You protected yourself with silence. I protected myself with assumptions. Both were shields. Neither was meant to hurt. Yet both created distance. This understanding did not bring regret. It brought clarity. Regret looks backward with blame. Clarity looks backward with learning. There were moments during the week when I almost reached for my phone, thinking of sending a message. Not to ask questions, not to demand answers, just to speak. Each time I paused. Not because I was afraid, but because I was honest. I asked myself if the moment was about connection or about relief. I learned that sometimes silence is not avoidance. Sometimes it is respect for timing. I noticed how different this silence felt compared to the old one. Before, silence was heavy, filled with unsaid expectations. Now it felt spacious. It allowed thoughts to breathe. It allowed emotions to settle naturally, without pressure. During one quiet evening, I remembered a sentence you once said without realizing its weight. You said, "Some feelings are real, but they don't always know where to go." At the time, I nodded without understanding. Now that sentence felt like a key. It unlocked many small doors in my memory. It explained your hesitation, your pauses, your careful words. It explained why you sometimes chose distance over explanation. I realized how often we expect others to know how to handle emotions simply because we feel them strongly. But feeling something deeply does not mean knowing how to express it safely. Expression requires trust, safety, and practice. Not everyone has learned that skill in gentle ways. As days turned into nights, I felt myself becoming more observant, less reactive. When someone around me misunderstood me, I did not rush to correct them. I watched how they saw the situation. I listened. And many times, I understood their view without agreeing with it. That felt like growth. I also noticed that I stopped telling our story to myself in one fixed way. Before, the story had a clear shape: expectation, disappointment, distance. Now it had layers. It included fear, timing, past wounds, and unspoken care. It did not excuse pain, but it gave it context. Context changes everything. One night I sat near the window again, watching lights in distant buildings turn on and off. Each light represented a life, a private world. I thought about how rarely we truly know another person's inner landscape. We see actions, hear words, but the reasons behind them remain hidden unless someone chooses to share them. And sharing is not easy. I asked myself a quiet question. If you had felt safer, would things have been different? I did not try to answer it. The question itself was enough. Some questions are not meant to be solved. They are meant to widen our perspective. I also asked myself if I had always offered safety when I thought I did. Safety is not just kindness. It is patience. It is allowing someone to move at their own emotional speed. I realized that sometimes my desire for honesty may have felt like pressure to you. That realization was uncomfortable, but necessary. I learned that good intentions do not always create good outcomes. And that does not make anyone bad. It makes us human. There were moments when sadness appeared unexpectedly. A song, a place, a familiar time of day. But the sadness no longer felt sharp. It felt gentle, like a reminder rather than a wound. I allowed it to exist without pushing it away. Emotions lose their power when they are acknowledged calmly. I thought about how relationships are often judged by their endings, not their truth. But endings do not define everything. Sometimes, the value of a connection lies in what it teaches us, not how long it lasts. As another day ended, I realized that I no longer needed validation from the past. I did not need confirmation that my feelings were right or wrong. I accepted them as real, shaped by my understanding at the time. And I accepted that your feelings were real too, shaped by a different history. I began to see that understanding someone does not always mean staying connected to them. Sometimes understanding simply means letting go without resentment. Letting go without rewriting the story into something cruel. I noticed that when I thought of you now, I did not feel the urge to change you or the past. I felt acceptance. Not passive acceptance, but aware acceptance. The kind that recognizes limits without bitterness. As the weeks continued, the memory of that unexpected conversation remained clear, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt like a quiet teacher. It reminded me to listen before judging, to ask before assuming, to slow down when emotions feel unclear. I also noticed that my future relationships felt different in my imagination. I imagined myself being more patient, more open to pauses, more willing to sit with uncertainty. I imagined offering safety not just through words, but through time. One evening I wrote a single sentence in my notebook. Understanding does not change the past, but it changes how the past lives inside us. That sentence felt true. It felt earned. I realized that this experience had not just changed how I saw you, it changed how I saw people in general. Everyone carries invisible history. Everyone has reasons that do not show on the surface. And most misunderstandings are not caused by lack of care, but by lack of shared understanding. As night settled in once more, I felt peaceful in a way that did not depend on answers. I did not feel the need to label what we were or were not. I allowed the story to remain open, unfinished, honest. I understood now that some connections are meant to shape us, not stay with us forever. And some truths arrive late, not to fix things but to soften us. Time kept moving, but inside me it felt slower, gentler, like my thoughts had learned how to walk instead of run. I began to notice how this quiet change affected even the smallest parts of my day. When I woke up, I no longer carried the weight of unfinished thoughts the way I used to. They were still there, but they did not press against my chest. They rested somewhere deeper, waiting patiently instead of demanding attention. One morning, as I drank water and stood near the window, I noticed how light touched everything softly. It reminded me that not everything needs force to be seen. Some truths only appear when we stop trying to pull them out. This thought stayed with me longer than I expected. It felt connected to you, to that conversation, to everything that followed. I realized that I spent a long time pulling at answers, expecting them to appear clearly and quickly. But real understanding, I was learning, does not respond to pressure. It responds to patience. As the days continued, I found myself remembering you in different ways, not just through moments of confusion or distance, but through small details I once ignored. The way you listened more than you spoke. The way you noticed things quietly. The way you sometimes paused before answering, as if checking your words carefully. These details once frustrated me. Now they felt meaningful. They felt like signs of someone who learned to survive by being careful. I thought about how often we praise confidence and openness without realizing that silence can also be a form of strength. Silence can mean observation. It can mean reflection. It can mean fear, yes. But it can also mean respect for feelings that are not ready to be spoken. I wondered how many times your silence was misunderstood not just by me, but by others too. There were moments when I felt a quiet sadness for the version of you who learned to hide emotional truths instead of sharing them. Not pity, but compassion. I did not feel responsible for that pain, but I felt aware of it. Awareness does not ask us to fix others. It asks us to understand them without judgment. I noticed that my own emotional habits were changing too. When something felt unclear, I no longer rushed to name it as good or bad. I allowed it to remain undefined. That felt uncomfortable at first. I was used to labeling feelings quickly, organizing them into clear categories. Now I was learning to let feelings exist without names. That gave them space to change naturally. One afternoon, I walked past a place that held memories of us. In the past, that place always triggered tension inside me. This time, I stopped for a moment. I felt the memory arrive, but it did not hurt the way it once did. It felt distant, like something I could observe without stepping into. I realized that understanding creates distance from pain, not by denying it, but by placing it in context. I thought about the many conversations we never had, the words that stayed inside both of us. For a long time, I believed those unspoken words were failures. Now I saw them differently. They were not failures. They were unfinished attempts. Attempts shaped by fear, timing, and lack of safety. That realization changed how I felt about silence. Silence was no longer empty. It was full of effort that did not find the right moment. As evenings passed, I found myself sitting quietly more often, not to think about you specifically, but to reflect on life as a whole. I realized that this experience had opened something wider than just one relationship. It taught me about human connection in general, about how easily we misunderstand each other when we assume similarity instead of difference, about how rarely we ask what shaped someone before expecting them to meet us where we are. I remembered a moment when you once said that people only show the parts of themselves they feel safe showing. At the time, I thought you were talking about others. Now I realized you were also talking about yourself. That sentence felt like another piece falling into place. It did not change what happened between us, but it explained why it happened the way it did. There were times when I wondered if you ever felt misunderstood by me, if you ever felt unseen or pressured in ways I did not notice. That thought did not bring guilt. It brought humility. Humility allows us to accept that we were part of a situation without turning ourselves into villains. It allows growth without shame. I noticed that when people around me shared their struggles, I listened differently now. I did not rush to offer advice. I did not interrupt with comparisons. I listened for what they were not saying as much as for what they were saying. That shift felt meaningful. It felt like something good had grown out of confusion. One night as I lay awake, I realized that I was no longer waiting for something to happen between us. Not a message, not an explanation, not an apology. That waiting had quietly ended without a clear moment. I simply stopped expecting resolution from outside. I found something like resolution inside instead. Not answers, but acceptance. I understood that some people come into our lives to teach us how to listen better, even if we do not stay connected to them. Some connections are lessons, not destinations. And lessons do not always end with clarity. Sometimes they end with changed perspective. As days turned into more days, the memory of that unexpected conversation felt like a gentle guide rather than a heavy reminder. It guided how I interpreted silence, how I approached misunderstanding, how I treated emotional uncertainty. I did not feel the need to talk about it with others. It felt personal, quiet, complete in its own way. I also realized that forgiveness had entered my heart without announcement. Not forgiveness in the sense of erasing pain, but forgiveness as release. Release from the need to blame. Release from the need to hold on to old narratives. Forgiveness made space for peace. I thought about the idea of closure. How often people chase it, believing it will bring relief. I learned that closure does not always come from final conversations or clear endings. Sometimes closure comes from understanding enough to let go of the rest. There were still moments of curiosity. Moments when I wondered how you were, what you were thinking, how you carried your own memories. But that curiosity no longer carried urgency. It felt calm, respectful. It did not demand entry into your life. It simply acknowledged connection. As another night settled in, I felt something solid inside me. Not certainty, but balance. Balance between empathy and self-respect. Between understanding others and honoring my own experience. That balance felt like growth. I accepted that the story between us might never be spoken fully, even if it is understood internally. And that felt okay. Some stories are meant to be lived quietly, not explained loudly. I closed my eyes with a sense of gratitude for the lesson hidden inside an ordinary day. A day that began like any other and slowly changed how I see people, how I listen, how I hold silence. I did not know what the future would bring. I did not need to know. The story remained open, and for the first time, that openness felt peaceful rather than uncertain.